it pop up. Go.
Yep.
Okay. It says we are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, you're good to go.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our public who might be listening, and our staff and our council. So welcome everybody to our, this is our special meeting of council. It's live streamed, and it's to do with our official plan and our accessory dwelling discussions and so on. So this is our meeting of January the 26th, 2021. And we're going to open our meeting.
Okay.
We have a motion, and it was moved by Karen Jennings and seconded by Jeff Carroll, that the special meeting of council of the whole agenda dated January the 26th, 2021 be approved as circulated. All in favor? That is carried.
Just clarification, Bill,
Yes,
did it say special meeting of council or committee of whole?
that the special meeting of council of the whole.
That was a mistake. It should say council.
Thank you,
Yeah,
because the agenda does say council, just double checking.
I had to double
Yes.
check too.
yeah, I've corrected that. Thanks, Karen.
Okay.
Then I don't think we just had our last meeting and we did our moment of silence. So I don't believe that we need to hear with this special meeting of council. So I'm just going to go on to our the next part of the agenda, and that is also to remind all of council that if you do have any disclosure of interest on any topic, you can declare it at the beginning of the meeting or any time during the meeting. And thank you. Next motion I have here is was moved by Klaus Vandermeer and seconded by Ian Straight, that the council receive the following report. And that is the report of our consultant, Forbes Simon, and regarding the issues and the options report, the official plan review and the update. And that the following be recommended to council, that council provide comments and direction for staff to proceed with drafting the official plan amendment document to bring forward to a public meeting. All in favor? And that is carried. I probably should have held that till after Forbes's report. So I will just hold that, and then after we get the report, then I will just read that again. I'm just looking here, Joanna, for the minutes of the previous meeting. Was there a motion for the previous meeting?
I believe we passed the minutes of the last special, I believe it was a committee of the whole meeting. I believe we passed that at the last council. Or previous
Okay,
council.
because on this agenda, I just noticed it says minutes of the previous meeting.
Yeah, it's just because it's
So we
it's
passed
a
that?
template. I believe we
Okay,
have
and-
already passed it.
Okay, and so we did the business arising from those minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're going to, the next on our agenda, thing on our agenda is the delegations, and we have our consultant planner, Forbes Simon, with us. And again, welcome, Forbes. This is on the official plan review and the update. So I'm going to pass this back on to you. We have a fairly lengthy report, and we'll just move on with you. Thanks, Forbes.
Thank you very much, Reeve. I appreciate the opportunity to be back before you again. It seems like it's been a little while since we've had a chit chat, and hopefully you've had a chance to familiarize yourself with the issues and options report. What I'd like to do this evening, if it's possible, Reeve, is to walk through the policy option recommendations in the report one by one, have a discussion on them, and get direction from council on how to proceed with that, so that I can then go to the next step and start drafting up the official plan amendment to bring these changes into effect. So if that's acceptable to everyone, we can move on to section 3.2, the analysis of the report. The first policy issue is expanded opportunities for commercial industrial investment within the community. And there are 6 recommended policy options for your consideration under that section. The first one looks at expanding section 1.3.2 of the official plan to identify business park development opportunities within the community.
Can I get a
Yes,
little clarification where it is?
Where it would be on page 4 of the
Okay.
report, section 3.2.
Okay.
It's the first item in the table.
So Forbes, I'm looking at 3.2 under analysis.
Yes,
So
So
the
it's-
first item is 1.1.
yes, that's correct.
That's where you are?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. Okay,
Councillor Jennings, is that okay?
Yeah, I got it now. Yeah, I went down to 3.2.
More than one 3.2, isn't there?
okay, so you can go on then, Forbes, thanks.
Okay, so the first item is to expand, to identify additional emphasis of the business park within the community. The second point is to expand the home occupation provisions so that they can be located in an accessory structure. And that the second part of that is that we would look at section 2.2, the economic policy, and again, establish policy which identifies the township's business park as being investment ready, or at least set a path towards being investment ready. And then the third component of that is to clarify the wording of Genesis and dwellings. The next part of that section,
And you're still on that, you're still on that first page, right, under expanded opportunities?
that's correct.
Third column though.
Okay,
Yeah, the far right column.
yep.
Councillor Straight, did you have a question, sir?
I do. So yes, thank you very much, Forbes. I just how do we want to address this, Reeve? Do we want to, as we're going along, if we have questions, just raise our hand, or do you want to wait until we've done the whole section?
I think I think in this case, we may as well, and I'm sorry, Ian, I was trying to relocate where I was on the agenda here, that I missed your hand, but I think it's probably good, because if we wait till the end, it'll get lost. If that's okay with you, Forbes, if we can take the questions?
That would be my preference, Reeve.
Okay, so
Okay, Ian, go ahead.
so I guess my question under number 2 is expand home occupation policies to be more permissive, and that home occupations can be allocated in accessory buildings. What does home occupations can be located in accessory buildings exactly mean? Like
Well,
somebody else can start living in their garage if they're making cupboards?
yes, that's absolutely right. Most rural municipalities that I've worked with in the past have in the rural environment allowed for home occupations to be outside of the house, whether it's in a garage or a part of an old bank barn that they've restored or something like that. It allows for more home industry than home occupation. And it's something that has caught fire in a number of municipalities. I know there's some around you that this is quite a going concern and represents a significant new investment into the community and additional jobs within the community in these small, they're more like incubators, Councillor. There was one I worked with in Kempville. They worked out of the garage making cabinets. And after about 3 years and being very successful, they ended up buying a 2-acre lot in the business park and building a 3,000 square foot manufacturing operation. And so it allows people to have a small scale business that's, you know, a little bit more than what you could normally have in your house, which is typically related to offices. This is more rural home industry.
Follow up, Ian?
I guess my concern is that what's stopping someone right now from moving into an existing, you know, garage or something and just start living out of it without septic systems and wells and everything else like that?
So part of this would just be for home occupations. There would be no occupancy to live in the unit at all. It's just for the home occupation to be in that building. And if the home occupation requires a washroom or plumbing of any sort, then there would have to be a septic system and a well associated with that. But they would not be able to live in the unit, Councillor.
Yeah. Okay, so they wouldn't be able to live where they were making
No.
cabinets.
So it would be just like going out to the garage at the house and having a woodworking shop and making Adirondack chairs that you sell to Home Depot or something like that.
Okay, so really what it allows you to do is have a business that operates out of your garage at your own house.
Yes, sir. And there would be a limit on the size. There would be a limit on the number of employees. You wouldn't be able to store stuff outside. There are a lot of rules and regulations that come with it, similar to a home occupation, but it really does open up the opportunities for people within the community.
Thank you very much, sir.
Claus?
Muted.
You're muted, Claus? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Question, Forbes, in regards to the home occupation, small business and so forth, you're referring to a carpentry shop making Adirondack chairs and so forth. What about a mechanical shop, like a small repair, gas motors, lawnmower, chainsaw repair shop?
Very similar, Councillor. That type of thing would be permitted as well. You can put whatever limits you want on the scope, but I would suggest that small engine repair is a classic home occupation in an accessory unit in the rural area. The one thing that you want to be careful about is the automotive business, that you don't want to start getting body shops and things like that up and running. And typically the home occupation provisions would limit, would not permit automotive related uses, but things like small engine repairs would definitely be involved.
Okay, just a follow-up, Reeve, if I could.
Yes. Yes.
So on that note then, with the small engine repair and so forth, my concern would be from an environmental point of view with oils and gases in that being disposed out behind the building and parts of lawnmowers being stored outside the building and so forth. How do we police that?
Well, I think that you have to put in place the provisions. They would typically be in your zoning bylaw, Councillor. And you would just state that there's no outdoor storage of materials or goods. They would have to be licensed under ESSA if they're involving any oils or solvents or things of that nature. They have to get a license to be able to operate that stuff under TSSA. And you would put those provisions in place to make sure that people know the rules. And then just like everything else, Councillor, if they're not following the rules, then eventually they get caught through enforcement if their neighbors complain about it.
Thank you.
Jeff and then Ian.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think I like the idea, and I probably would imagine too as well. It's already going on in the township too as well, where people have
Oh, it is.
certain things like that going on. So it'd be nice to make that, you know, if people want to do that for their, you know, on their own property and they're doing it in the right way, it'd be nice to make it legal for them per se too as well. So I mean, I like, you know, giving the entrepreneurs maybe that ability to start something too as well. So I mean, there's so many positives behind it. So I mean, it's one of those things we're just allowing people to do it. So I think it's the right direction to kind of, once again, help with that expansion. And people might move. That's another reason to move into that area, because you're able to do those, start that business, and maybe you can expand from it. So people might like that too. I like it. Thanks.
Ian?
Yeah, I think that
Yes, Ian?
Mr. Borders kind of clarified that when he was talking about clause. I was just a little bit concerned about, you know, somebody starting up a small business in their garage and their neighbors right beside them, and you know, the guy's up until because he works all day and he wants to start his business. He's up until 2 a.m. in the morning fixing weed whackers and starting them and stopping them outside.
Mhm.
I think the zoning is my only. How do we control that? Is my only concern. I like the concept. I just want to make sure we have enough controls in place that doesn't become a problem.
And I appreciate that very much, Councillor. And typically there is a standard clause in home occupations that say they cannot cause any noise, odor, or negative effects on their neighboring properties, right? Typically you're talking about houses and people, their neighbors live in the houses next to them. And so the idea of someone out there banging tin till 3 o'clock in the morning just does not cut it. It would not be permitted.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we can go on then, Forbes. Thanks.
Thank you. The next one is number 3, and it says that it's to expand the policies of the business park to clarify the range of commercial industrial uses that are appropriate on private services. I think right now you've got some uses that really need sewer and water and they're on as a permitted use. And I think you need to be real about what can happen there and establish the need for an attractive site. So talk about landscaping and signage and lighting and proper site plan control. And then promote the property as the township's primary employment land and your asset.
Excuse me, Forbes, I have just a question about that. Would you be, are you suggesting that maybe we should spend a bit of effort in not just the landscaping, but I guess that would include the removal of some of the brush, trees and so on, but are you also suggesting that we, or maybe I could ask what your advice would be, should we be making it a little bit more clear what the boundaries are of the different lots in the business park? Because I think that when people drive in there, they really don't know the difference of whether it's a 1 acre, 3 acre, or 7 acres or what.
So Reeve, that's a really good point. And this isn't related to your official plan. And this is just my experience and advice for you to take it as you see fit. I had a subdivision in a community once that sat for 10 years and not a house was built on it. The roads were in, the hydro was in, the ditches were a mess. It was sort of untidy. A new person came along, put a new sign up, mowed all the ditches, put boundaries of where all the lots were, And within the course of 3 years, the subdivision was built out. Whether it was timing and economics, or whether it was that he showed the product the way it needs to be shown to sell it, is a debate. But I think that anything that you can do to improve the appearance of the properties and make it clear that it's land that's for sale, you're going to be successful, right? And it's going to be better than just sort of sitting there hoping that something happens. I think that you need to be a little bit more engaged and a little bit more of a real estate salesman when you're looking at this business park.
The biggest problem that I think that we've had over the years in trying to develop the business park, I think the biggest problem was the fact that we didn't have, it wasn't a serviced area. And although we were trying to encourage, I guess you could say, industrial / commercial, they seem to all want a serviced area as opposed to septics and wells. And because we're at the head of the watershed, we always ran into problems there.
Yep. There are issues, and I think that there's real source water protection issues, but I would point you to a place like the South Gore Business Park in North Grenville down the road. That's got a lot of really good businesses in there that pay big taxes and employ a lot of people, and they're all on well and septic system, and it's appropriate for them to be on well and septic system. Not all industry needs to be on the pipe. And I think that the idea is to get a focused range of uses that would be appropriate on well and septic and promote the heck out of it.
Thanks. Jeff, did you have a question? Jeff?
Yeah, just to chime in, I mean, I
Yes,
appreciate, just to chime in, I appreciate Forbes, candid sort of advice on that, because I think that's a big part of it. And maybe that's, we need to show that it's more for sale, and we need to cut up the lines and everything else. Cause I mean, it was mowed there a few years ago to make it look a little bit better. But selling that product might be, and really listing out what would be appropriate there. Maybe that'll help us sell it. And I appreciate that, Forbes, because we need to find a way to utilize that, because it's, I mean, it sits empty for so long with this big sign on it saying it's a commercial, business park, but it has nobody in it. So, I say I want to appreciate that, because I think we should maybe look at that to go forward if we really want to fill that place up. So,
at the end of the day, it comes down to not so
Okay.
much money, but a bit of elbow grease, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can move on to the next section then.
The next one is to continue to prohibit residential development in your business park. I think that whenever you introduce a residential use, you create a compatibility issue, and it would limit the types of businesses that could go in there. And you've got a lot of land that you can put houses on, and I would encourage you not to put them on the business park.
I agree.
Okay.
The next one may take a bit of work, but I think that it's worthwhile to explore the idea of an airport business park and have some of the airport lands, or at least lands around the airport, available for another business park in your community. It's on a great road, a really good location. And it's an idea that we kicked around with your staff, and I think it's something that you may want to pursue.
Jeff?
So, Forbes, you're suggesting more business oriented for entirely there, not residential whatsoever. Like, you think it's more of an opportunity for, like, we obviously have lots of places for residential, but do you think that's a better place for business?
I think the airport's a great location for some industry, and not just related to the airport function, but a broader sort of business park function.
When we did that economic development review, I think it was around 2008. They were actually kind of, at the time, they were promoting the idea of aviation related activities. And one of the things that was talked about at the time was something that they think they had also tried or did in Carp and Arnprior, and what they called an air park, where they would allow a home with a taxiway up to the home. So one could live there and have a plane at the same time.
Question though?
Yeah, I just didn't know whether, Forbes, if you wanted to kind of respond to that, then we go to Karen and Claus.
If there's sufficient lands to be able to do something like that, I think it's very creative. Again, I think my focus in this section was more on economic development and new investment in the community as opposed to residents. But I will commit, Reeve, to take a look at that Arnprior example, and I can incorporate some of their thinking into that approach.
And if it wasn't Arnprior, it might have been Arnprior and Carp, but I do think that some of the airports do that. So Karen, I'll go to you.
So I'm getting that it's around the airport, but we don't really have the ability to do things with the airport because that is a private club. So it's not even commercial usage, etc. And for people to build a house to try and use it, they still have to become members of that club to be able to use that airport. So we're just trying to say, here's property that's close to an airport to expand it, to make it to business park.
More or less.
But yet if it's not a commercial airport, how do you sell it that way?
I think it doesn't need to be a commercial airport to be able to attract new investment and have commercial and industrial activity. I think that the airport is an amenity feature, and this is just trying to take advantage the best you can of that amenity feature.
I'd like to also say that we're in the middle of ongoing discussions with the town, the township, and the Smith Falls Flying Club to review the agreement, which is very antiquated, which goes back to, I believe it's 1992. And so our next meeting is Friday, but we've already had 2 or 3, and Friday we'll be starting to discuss it with the club. So it's very, very in depth. It's got a lot to do with development, but most of it is to update and review the old agreement. And so I'm sure that councils is going to be hearing lots of information coming forward in the near future with those discussions. Claus, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, just on Karen's note, maybe, or sorry, your note, Reeve, about building some residentials and having them be able to taxi their airplane close to their private little hangar on their own property. How close can you build a house and residential to an airport, Forbes?
Well, there are Transport Canada restrictions, not so much on the location, but the height that you can have your house close to an airport. I dealt with that in detail in, it was Mississippi Mills. They have, their hospital had a helipad, and it had quite an area around it that had a height restriction, but I don't know that there's any sort of separation distances that I've ever come across for an airport and a house.
Okay, thank you.
The final component of this section, Reeve, if I may, is to look at section 2 of your official plan and to speak to both the positive and negative financial impacts of various types of development. And I think, again, this is talking about new commercial and industrial investment being positive, but that we have to be careful with things like scattered rural residential development that under certain circumstances can not have a positive impact on the municipality. That the taxes you would get from a rural residence wouldn't necessarily cover the costs associated with providing services to that. And so that last point is to look and have some more general statements in that economic policy section that talks about both the positives of new investment as well as the potential negatives. And that's the end of the points on section 1, Reeve. I don't know if now's the time to go and see if we can get a straw vote on direction from each one.
I think we should do it with each section if we can, and then we can move on. But I did see Jeff's hand.
I wanted to clarify because I like the idea, the option to develop policies that speak to potential financial impact. So like it kind of lays it out there. So like when people are asking about, well, why won't you let me sever this or do this? And it's like, well, here's why, here's the cost implications and why we want to, deter from doing those type of things, because it actually is everybody will have to pay more taxes because of doing those kind of things. Is that kind of, because we discussed that with people, but it'd be nice to have something, I guess, a document that kind of states that. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
That's exactly right, Councillor. And then one of the things that came up through my interviews with both staff and council, as well as from the public, is that, what is right? What is bad? What is good planning, right? And I think that having some clarity about at least the financial impacts of certain types of development is a good thing to have as a resource tool. And this is sort of in the preamble introduction section of the official plan.
That's good, yeah, because I know we had discussed that about that. That's been a big hot topic about this too, as well, about the financial implications. And I think that'd be really good to be spelled out there, especially right at the beginning. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna, yeah, okay. Thanks, Forbes.
And there's different scales of it too. If you look at rural residential, it's not a bad thing for the person that had the property that the lot got severed from. That's good for them. It's good for the person that bought the property. It's good for the person that built the house on the property or the trades that were involved with that.
Yeah.
But it's not good for the municipality in terms of a sustainable form of development. And so you can talk about both the positive and the
Forbes, I have a question, and I know that having read this complete report, it comes up in several places where you talk about settlement areas. And, we generally think that we have, I think, 7 settlement areas, including the built up areas near the peripheral of Smith Falls. But I often wonder, and I just wouldn't mind your advice here. If there's a better time to talk about it, please tell me. But when I'm thinking about settlement areas, I think that we're kind of lacking one area, that being an area closer to the Ottawa/Beckwith boundary.
right.
And it seems to be like we've had several houses built in the last year, 2 or 3, along Roger Stevens and Pinery Road and so on. Like we have had quite a bit of building going on closer to the border. But I guess my question is, should we be thinking about maybe a little bit more effort in that direction?
And that's a really good question. And I think we touch on it a little bit in the next section, Reeve. And and I'd like to think a little bit more before I give you an answer to that. So I'm going to punt this one to the
Okay.
next section and let me think about that one a little bit.
No problem. Okay, so now, do you want us to give you like staff direction, or is this needing a motion, or what do you wish?
I think at this point in time, Reeve, just a straw vote of the hands that support moving forward with, you know, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of this section. That's all I need.
Okay, then I'm going to go around the table here, and it just so happens that Karen, you're first.
Okay with it, because there'll still be discussions with reference to each of those as they come up.
What will happen, Counselor, is that I will draft up wording, specific wording, and then present that to you. That's the next step in the project. So you'll have a chance to wordsmith, to rethink it, and then you can say, well, that isn't what I thought you were talking about. And that's not something I support, right? So this is just a step in the process to allow me to do some detailed work for you.
I'm okay.
Okay, Claus,
Yeah, I'm good with those points.
Ian,
Yeah, I'm fine with those points.
Jeff,
Yeah, me too.
and I'm not going to go against anybody, so I do too.
Thank you very much, Council. The next section of the report is deals with the hamlet settlement areas. And again, at the introduction of the official plan, I'm suggesting we include reference to promoting the growth and development of your existing hamlets. I think that's one of your key assets, and you just like the business park, it needs more attention, it needs more promotion. One of the other things that's important to realize is that the official plan does a really good job in section 1.3.2, identifying your hamlets and highlighting the fact that Rosedale and Adamsville are the hamlets that are most suitable for development. Andrewsville.
Andrewsville, yep.
Sorry, Andrewsville. And so I'm not suggesting any changes. I think actually that section is extremely well written.
Yep.
With respect to the hamlets, under section 3.7 of your plan, there should be reference to a broader range of uses that can be permitted in the hamlets. I think too often it just focuses on the residential, and I think to have a well-rounded hamlet, there needs to be more to it. And there's some really good examples out there of policies that have a very broad range or sort of view of what a hamlet can be. And I would suggest that we look at that. I also think that the policies need to change to promote more subdivision development and less severances in the hamlet areas. I think you're not going to get to where you want to be by doing severances in the hamlets. And all that does is just decrease the amount of land that's available for subdivision development. And so my suggestion to you is that severances wouldn't be appropriate if more than 3 lots could be developed. That would be a reversal of the current policies. I think the current policies are more permissive towards severances. And I think that if you really want to see your hamlets grow, it has to be done through the plan of subdivision. I think it's the only efficient way. The other thing, and this is something that I'd like to explore with you, is this idea of incentives to develop your subdivisions. You know, there could be policy incentives where maybe the municipality would assist with certain studies being done, or that there would be a reduction in the amount of securities that you would hold for the development of roads and subdivisions. There's different tools that you could have that provide financial incentives for people to invest and do a subdivision in your municipality. Some municipalities will go out and with certain lands will pay for the environmental impact assessment. I think you've got to be careful about them, but I do think that there's maybe some options for you to again promote and also to create favorable conditions for investment.
I have a question from Claus.
Thank you, Reeve. In the settlement areas and getting a subdivision in there, would we stick with the 2 acre lots or cut it down to 1? There was some discussion about being able to cut the lot size down.
I think when you do a subdivision, Councillor, you always end up doing a hydrogeologic assessment that identifies the suitability of the soils for septic systems and the supply of well water. And when you do that type of $20,000 engineering study, you can justify smaller lots.
Okay.
And I've seen them recently get them down to 3/4 of an acre. And then that gives you more opportunities to put houses in there. So it makes it more cost effective. And so I think you definitely would be looking at less than 2 acres, assuming the hydrologic conditions are favorable.
Follow-up, Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Follow up. So Forbes, you mentioned about doing some incentives, which I like that idea, for a potential developer to put a subdivision in. So do we go out and seek these people, or do we wait till they come to us?
Well, I think that you can do a bit of both. One is the first thing would be to get this incentive package together.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part would be to go out and promote that. You know, I think between Joanna and Carl and myself, we could probably write you a list of 10 builders that you may want to cold call and let them know that, listen, you've got an opportunity in your community for investment and for them to come out and look at it. I think you have to do those types of things, but the first step would be to get the policy in place.
We had actually planned on having a workshop day
Builders
and
Forum.
invite all the builders to come. So we had planned on doing that before COVID hit. So I would assume that our council would want to do that as soon as possible when we can. If you were finished, Claus, then I do have Jeff, but I think that maybe Carl would like to respond to that, and then I'll go to you, Jeff. Yes, Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Reeve, and also to Forbes as well. I've worked with a community improvement plan that actually has programs that assist with the revitalization of say brownfield sites, and I'm wondering, and Forbes, if you can speak to this, a community improvement plan under Section 28 of the Planning Act as perhaps a mechanism to advance incentive programs for say assisting with the cost of supporting studies with the rebates returned to the proponents upon at certain stages of say subdivision approval. So I think that's I'm wondering from your perspective if that's a viable path forward on that. I think looking at the settlement areas and creating these carrots to incentivize development there is very important, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
If I may, Reeve, I think that the CIP would be the logical tool that you would use, Carl. Community improvement plans give municipalities the options to do things with financial incentives that they wouldn't normally have under the Municipal Act. And so I think Carl's spot on. It would be a very creative use of a community improvement plan, but I think that it certainly has merit, and I'd like to explore that one a little bit more, actually. I think that's a very clever idea.
Okay, and I have Jeff and then Joanna, please.
Does Joanna have a follow-up to that though? That might be helpful?
I'm not sure. Joanna, we'll go to you, Joanna.
It was just to let you know, I know Carl and I have talked about CIP, and it is on the list of the things that we're looking at doing. I just want to confirm with Forbes that that'll be, because I haven't read the official plan, make sure that CIP statement is in the official plan so we can move forward with that.
We'll make sure it's in there. There's cookie cutters for that, so.
Yeah, for sure. So that, just so council is aware, that is on our list of things to get to.
Thanks, Joanna. Okay, Jeff.
So the counter to that, I mean, it's nice to offer incentives. I mean, it's all about being competitive, I guess, too, as well. So I mean, like if that sells it or not, you never know if you give that incentive, it's going to sell or not. But the other side of it, would you think of extra fees on the ones that are not in the settlement areas? So like if more creation wants to be done on roads that are as in good a shape, it's going to cost more to do that, or is that sort of a more very negative approach to go instead? Like it's better to offer discounts than it is than to look at extra fees on those type of, because we know those aren't cost effective. And the other side of it is like where subdivisions can't go in. So like you may have that that end up having that strip development because there's maybe the land in the back is not there to develop, or it's good farmland or that side of it, but they're not necessarily in the hamlets, but they're still on a good maintained road, like and even a county road or one of our paved roads. Do we want to allow more severances, say, on those kind of areas to allow, because we want to build as much as we can on the paved roads, if anything else.
Yeah. Councillor, I do pick up on that policy. I do speak to that later on in the report. And if we could maybe park that one, but that's a really important point. Correct. Do you have development charges?
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the things that you can do is use your development charges as a tool, where the development charge in a hamlet would be less than the development charge in a rural area. And it could be, you could even structure it so that, if you've got a gravel road, the development charges is 10% higher than if it was a paved road. That type of thing, recognizing that growth comes with costs, right? You might be able to justify DCs that are higher in rural areas than they are in the settlement areas. I'd need to think about that a little bit more, though, Councillor, to be honest with you. I'd need to double check legislation and see what limits there might be in place under the development charges. But I think that there's tools that you can do that kind of stuff.
Just to follow up, because I'm interested in that side, because I want to make sure we do that development growth properly, but I don't want to inhibit also like severances or building lots on roads that are great roads to do it, but we're saying, well, no, you've hit your lot, you've hit your severance limit on that, but there's still lots of places you can put more houses on that road. It's just not suitable at this point for a subdivision. So it's
and I do talk about that a little bit later on, and I've got an option for you.
Okay.
That's the end of that section, Reeve. So there's 3 bullets in that section. If I could get council's direction.
Okay, I'm going to start with you, Ian, then this time.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Claus?
Yep, good.
Karen?
Yes.
And Jeff?
Yep.
And yes, it's a unanimous there, Ed Forbes?
So far, so good, guys. We're making headway. The next section is pretty straightforward. It's just one item. Currently, your official plan does not permit communal services within your municipality. And I think that it's a necessary tool for a rural-based municipality that doesn't have a central sewer and water system. I think a communal system, although it isn't perfect, and it comes with challenges, I think it's the best option available to you to have a proper sort of compact development in your community.
So I know that somewhere in your report there, I was reading, Forbes, that, you know, municipalities are allowed to have their own communal system. I guess the problem, the big problem would be, I guess, the risk, the mitigation risk that you have with a communal system. Can you comment on that?
So communal systems are tried, tested, and true technology. There's no real rocket science associated with them. I think that you can think of them as a glorified septic system with some pipes collecting effluent from various houses. It's not a complicated system.
Mm-hmm.
There are requirements by the Ministry of the Environment that have made establishing communal systems challenging. And it relates to responsibility agreements. And what ends up happening is that you can't have a communal system without a responsibility agreement. If the municipality is the owner of the system, you eliminate the need for the responsibility agreement, but it means that you have to have a partnership with a private sector developer that you know is going to build the houses that will be able to make the plant run efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So I would suggest that any form of communal system, whether it's privately owned or publicly owned, would be a partnership between public and private.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of examples out there. And if you want more examples of what responsibility agreements look like, I can get them for you. They're pretty straightforward. The other thing to keep in mind, whenever you build any new infrastructure, whether it's a road or bridge or a communal system, you've got 10 or 15 years of pretty well maintenance-free operations, right? And as long as you're making sure that your reserve fund is topped up to be able to cover maintenance costs, they're really quite an affordable way of going forward.
Thanks. Claus, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. Forbes, so a communal system to me would be an ideal thing for a trailer park. That would be.
They work very well. They work very well in modular home parks for sure. Yes.
Yeah. So in that sense, then who would put that communal system in? Would the township put it in or the developer?
Again, Councillor, I think that you would be in some sort of partnership. I think the municipality may be asked to assume some long-term financial risk. Typically with private developments, it's the private developer that makes all the investment. But if there was a communal system, maybe the municipality would have a more active role to play in the development. Again, this is where you would start talking about incentives, you know, that the municipality will cover the $500,000 liability associated with the life of that system, right? It's different options, but it doesn't matter whether it's a trailer or a house. The communal system allows for smaller lots and more compact development.
Just if the township then is involved in building this communal system, then the township has to realize that there's going to be ongoing maintenance on this thing.
Yep.
And agreements have to be, an agreement has to be negotiated, and these agreements can run out of date and have to be redone.
The agreements that they have now, Councillor, are pretty bulletproof. They've been through so many lawyers and had so many different groups and organizations sort of pass judgment on them. They're pretty pretty solid pieces of work. But again,
So I have,
Okay.
I'm going to go to you, Karen, in a sec. I saw your hand, but I think Carl wants to respond to that.
Yes, so in my previous municipal experience, I was involved in the negotiation of a responsibility agreement to accommodate a new mobile home park in Drummond, North Elmsley, and it's certainly doable. I think the real discussion, and as Forbes stated, there were lawyers on both sides were working very closely with that, and it came down to a question for council and for the developer as to how much risk both sides were willing to assume. So in essence, the process, the communal system was built and funded entirely by the developer, and in this case, we did have to work with them. In essence, they needed to pay for the system twice. So for the first to cover the replacement costs, and then the actual and top that up as the park was developed. So part of the process through that involved the discussion for how much, if we can accept a lower cost or sort of spread out the developer's contributions, that would incur perhaps a little bit more risk to the municipality if the system were to fail earlier. But ultimately, if we were to put too much upfront cost pressure on the developer, that would call into question the viability of the project as a whole. So it was a very careful negotiation. Ultimately, we got something that worked for everybody, but it really came down to a question between the municipality and the developer as to how much risk. There's no such thing as an entirely risk-free approach, but how much risk were we willing to assume? It's very much it's a very unique. Each agreement would be very unique to those individual circumstances, but I think it's a very appropriate. It's an appropriate planning tool, and it accommodates something that has a lot of value to the community, as Forbes said. Also accommodates a more compact form of development.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Karen?
So just a question with reference to this communal well
Karen?
and septic. Yes. This communal well and septic, the agreements
ahead.
then would be with those properties that are within that, using that, and that they then in turn would have, say, a monthly fee that would be paid to the municipality to put to the reserve for future work that's needed, so that the rest of the residents of Montague don't have to pay for that, similar to the Adirona and Rideau agreements?
you're 100% correct, Counselor. That's exactly what would happen. So it's almost like an area rated charge.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay.
So if I could have council,
Is that the end of this? Is that the end of this section then for you, Forbes?
yes, sir.
Okay, we'll just go around and get consensus again. Jeff, I'll start with you on this one.
Yep, I'm all for this.
Okay, Karen
Yes.
and Claus,
Yes.
Ian
Yep.
and Ian.
Yes.
Okay, that's good, Forbes. Moving on then.
Thank you very much. So the next section deals with the issue of rural residential development. My recommendation to you is that the consent policies stay status quo with respect to the number of lots created by consent. I think that it's working, and it's an effective policy, and it's one of those cornerstone policies that I would suggest you not mess with too much. I think that there is an opportunity to look at various roads within your community, but using your new roads needs assessment, and develop a policy that says if you've got less than a 6-meter gravel road, that you don't get any severances on those lots until the road's brought up to a certain standard. you could look at policies that would suggest that, well, I think that what you would do is you would look at certain roads within your municipality and identify them, that your road needs assessments done, and said, you know what, these roads aren't appropriate for any more development than is there now. And then what you end up doing is getting severances more on the tar and chip and the paved roads, and less on the old traditional rural gravel road. The other thing that I think is you've got policies that discourage strip development, but there's no definition of strip development. And most official plans that discourage strip development explain what that is. And it's a definition. And I've provided one in the report that's an example for you to take a look at. And it's basically the separation from one lot to a next lot is greater than 300 meters, is a common approach.
I have a question. I have two questions here, Forbes. The first from Claus.
Thanks, Reeve. Forbes, back on your suggestion, I don't necessarily disagree, to encourage people to develop lots on a paved road or a tar and chip road, not on a poorly gravel road, or less standard gravel road, let's say. Okay. Now, there's probably lots of families in Montague that own a good stretch of land on a less traveled gravel road, and they've got a couple of kids and they want to subdivide one off and give one to their children. What do we do in that situation?
Well, Councillor, that's the hard part of the job, isn't it?
Yeah.
The point about establishing policy is that the personal situation doesn't come into play, that you rely on the policy to stand on its own. And if you had a policy that said that poor standard gravel roads are not appropriate for severances, then that's the law of the land. And whether it's someone you went to school with, or someone that's just moved into the community, or depending, whatever their hardship situation may be that they advance, the rule's the rule, right? And it's not a nice thing to talk about, but I think that's the approach that you have to take when you have public policy and the challenges of implementing them.
Jeff?
Yeah, because it's a tricky one, because I tell people that they can't have any severance, exactly to Claus's point, is definitely tricky. And like you said, it puts that, that personal feeling in there. Some people might think it might also be a financial thing for them too as well. But on the other side of it, that's where I have a hard time on the other side, is that, but the rest of the township shouldn't have to pay for, because you want that one lot to happen. And that's really, it's tricky, but I think overall, I mean, people want us to make sure that we're costing out as appropriate as possible. So I don't know if going to zero is something that is what I want and maybe entirely want to do, because I think completely turning the tap off on the dirt roads is tricky, but definitely slowing it down to a trickle would be something that would be more, maybe that's the wrong approach, but I just feel like there's still going to be some development on those gravel roads, and slowly, but we want to really trickle that pace down so it maybe doesn't affect our costs as much as quickly, or a demand to have to tar and chip that road when we're not prepared to or financially able to. That was my perspective. I wouldn't mind if you might pretty well already touched on all that for us, but if there's more you want to talk about that, feel free. I guess now that strip development thing is, do we want to restrict that strict development? That's where I have a hard time. If it's on a really good road, I mean, we want to make sure that I almost want to think if it's a paved road, we want to put as many houses on it as possible. So I don't want to say, oh, you know what, we've hit that strip and now we have to have a big space here, even though, and you can't put a house there. And it's like, well, does that policy make sense then? Because it's a paved road. Like on a paved road, to me, I almost think If it can't be a subdivision off it, it's like just house. Anyway, so that would be the most financially benefit thing for us to do.
Well, if I may, I don't think that if you had a house every 300 feet along a paved road that you would find that it's a positive financial situation for the municipality. I think you would find that the costs of providing services to those lots would far exceed the taxation that you would get from them on an annual basis. But I do take the point that of not shutting it off completely. I think that that's a really appropriate position to take. And so that maybe you get one severance when you're on a substandard gravel road, but when you're on a tire, a chip, or a paved, then you get the 3 severances, or 2 severances and 3, whatever it may be, that there's less opportunity on the poor standard roads. The reality is, council, that severances don't pay their way, right? They will cover the 20-year life cycle cost of the road in front of their property, and that's it. They will not, if you put together all the tax dollars you would get from a 3,000 square foot, 2-story house built in 1995 on one of your roads, you figured out the taxes that you would get from that over 20 years, and you figured the cost of that stretch of road and maintaining that stretch of road for 20 years, you would find that you're losing money. And that doesn't pay for any recreation or emergency services or administration. And so they're not a good financial deal for the municipality. That's the end result under any circumstance.
Okay, so I have Karen and Claus and Jeff.
So I have a couple questions. One of them had to do with, we're not going to do any more severances. But I had a question about if the severances have already occurred, do they become grandfathered because they were severed as allowable building lots? The next one was, you just made reference to services being provided to those houses that are like 300 feet apart or whatever. If it's on a paved road that's already got housing on it, what services are we having to provide to it?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know.
Me too.
Just getting clarification.
Yeah.
Well, I think to go back to the first question, existing lots of record are always grandfathered. You can't take away someone's lot that they've already had. When you look at your services, and I don't know the services that Montague provide intimately, but there's garbage pickup. We don't have that in my municipality. I have to drive to my dump, right? But many municipalities have curbside pickup of recycling and garbage. You've got your recreation services that are provided throughout the municipality that people contribute to. You've got emergency services, fire, police. Rural policing is a big ticket item. I'm sure it's a big part of your budget. The more you have scattered throughout an area, the more expensive it is to police that area. And then, of course, there's the snow removal, the ditch maintenance, the resurfacing of the roads and things of that nature. So the services are all the services that are provided to all your residents. And the tax dollars that they pay are intended to pay for the services that they get. That's the concept anyway.
Follow up?
Yes.
So that's where I was looking for clarification, because if we're already on a developed road that already had houses, we've already got all those services being provided to those houses that are there, that if we now start building a few more on that road, is that additional tax dollars not going to help offset those other costs since they're already there provided anyway?
And I think that when you look at things in isolation, Counselor, you can justify that, right? But when you look at it on a larger scale, township wide, the argument falls apart, right? And so you have to come up with public policy that applies throughout the community, right? You can't have one consent policy for, lots 1, 2, and 3 in concession 6 and a different consent policies over in concession 9. Hit my light.
Okay.
I
Okay,
guess I was just,
go ahead,
if
Karen.
we could come up with policies that are for like the tar and chip and the paved roads already, and then come up with the ones that are the gravel roads, and then come up with the ones that are the lower grade roads. Do separate policies along those lines.
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting that we explore.
Okay, Claus and then Jeff.
Yeah, I'll be quick because Karen pretty well said what I was going to say. Example, Forbes, like Rosedale Road, it's a paved road, it's well ditched and so forth. There's houses on there already, and there's lots of room for more housing on there. And the county takes care of the biggest part of that road. And that, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow strip developing to continue on that road. It's already there. And back to your point about severances on a substandard road, I think, as Jeff pointed out, we should allow something. Just to have a zero policy, I'm not so sure that's really good. And I'm not talking about having friends on these roads. I wouldn't know them from Adam, but I think they should be allowed at least 1, maybe 2 severances.
Hey, Jeff.
I mean, Karen did really nail it, because I still struggle with that, because it's like and even Forbes, I respect your answer, but I still struggle with it a bit. Where if the road is a paved road and everything else, and you plop a new house on it and you put a driveway on it, like you're still plowing that road, you're still doing it, you're just adding it. At the end of the day, you're adding a garbage stop. And I understand your average traffic's going to go up a little bit on that road too as well. But that, to me, that seems like a pretty good cost benefit at the end of the day. Where gravel roads beat up a lot faster than everything else. We know that, and it's and as soon as you increase average traffic on any gravel road, it beats it up. But I like to think if you increase average traffic on a paved road from, argument's sake, 600 to 650, it's not going to diminish that road or speed up the diminishing of that road over the years. If you went from 6 to 900 average a day, I could see you could start to get into that conversation. So I guess that I still struggle with trying to understand how it seems like every case that there's a way of trying to do that development, it's all a negative. But when I look at neighboring municipalities that have had exponential growth, who have have maintained a strong tax rate, and they've gone through those growths, there has to be a benefit to those growths.
The benefits, I think, the benefits get more or the financial liabilities are less when you go by plan of subdivision. And so I think that when you look north to Beckwith or south into like North Grenville and things like that are getting a lot of development, you're seeing the majority of that on subdivisions, and that there really is limited severances. Guys, I'm not suggesting that we get rid of severances. I'm not suggesting that at least. All I am suggesting is that there's maybe a policy approach that you could take that gives you a bit better financial situation than what you would have going forward with the policies you have now.
Just a follow-up. I have a follow-up kind of. So, I appreciate the side of the severances, because I still try to understand. So if we do a subdivision, that means that road is now, we have a new road created that is an added, I guess you could say, liability to the township, and that's that cost value that Obviously we want the developer, I'm assuming to try to pay for that or have that paid for and everything along that guy. So when we take it over, we're able to start recouping those costs a little bit better. Is that because I mean, if planned subdivisions are the way to go, but we touch on a bit, is it the most cost effective to do it? But so is it cost effective to do the planned subdivisions?
There's different models that would suggest that rural subdivisions are just a little bit better than severances, and that they're still not giving you sort of a neutral cost benefit, which is, I think, ultimately what you're looking for with residential, is a neutral, that the money you take in covers the cost going out.
Yeah.
I do know that there have been studies done in the past that would suggest that you need to get down to about 4 units per acre, which would say you have to have a communal system before you get to a break-even position with residential development. There's other studies that would challenge that. I do think that clearly subdivisions are better financially for the municipality than severances. You get a brand new road, you get it built to your standards. You don't assume it if it's not built to your standards. And getting a brand new paved road should have minimal maintenance responsibilities for at least 6 years before you have to clean out ditches. So again, I'm not suggesting we eliminate severances, right? I'm just suggesting that maybe they should be going in locations that are more sustainable than if they were on a substandard road.
Okay, I'm going to go to Ian, and then I'll come back to you, Jeff. Ian?
Okay, yeah, let's go.
Jeff, go ahead and finish what you're saying there.
Lose my train of thought there. So I guess with subdivisions, how do we incentivize those people that maybe are looking at doing severances to sort of steer them away from that to saying, actually, you have that 15 acre, 25 acres there that you're trying to look at how you're severancing. Why don't we look at how we can turn that into a subdivision? How do we, I guess, incentivize that? Because I think a lot of people think I have 3 severances. I can do these 3 severances, but how do we, I guess, besides, I guess we can write it down in this, but how do we change that thinking to make people start thinking about how I can have a planned subdivision off that instead of just a severance?
Well, that's a really good question, Councillor. I think for the average person, the idea of undertaking a plan of subdivision is daunting at best. That it's a really big undertaking, and it's not something that they would ever consider wanting to do. Most people that have rural lands, I think in 30 years, I've only met 1 or 2 that ever were savvy enough to be able to go into the plan of subdivision world and do a big multi-million-dollar development. Most people see the severances as a pretty straightforward exercise. It's certainly got more expensive to do it over the years, right? With the studies that you have to do and the assessments that have to be done. But still, you can probably get away without spending much more than $20,000 to realize an $80,000 asset, right? And most people will look at that and want to do it. You're not going to get rid of the attractiveness of severances. But what I think that I'm suggesting here, and it's more into the next section, Councillor, is that there are other options, particularly when the severances have been taken up. If you've got a stretch of land that's had the 3 severances, right? What else can I do? And so I have suggested here that the municipality think about this idea of a cluster lot development. It's worked modestly well in Mississippi Mills, but I think that it would be a really interesting option for Montague, and people might find it attractive. It's a smaller, sort of like a subdivision light, right? It's a smaller little subdivision. And there's existing policies that I'd like you to take a look at that would maybe make that attractive to not your average property owner, but somebody that's maybe got a little bit of experience in the development industry, whether it's a contractor or somebody like that. They may find the cluster lot option attractive.
Follow up then again, Jeff?
Would you recommend a township looking at certain lots like that and maybe saying if that was coming up, and say the planner is looking at it going, you know what, it would make more sense for this to be set up as like a subdivision or that kind of stuff. The homeowner's not really interested, maybe, whatever. But the township kind of goes, well, maybe we should buy that ourselves to set it up as a subdivision. So because it takes it away from the home, like how do we, or is that where we have like the connection basis with those builders to say, why don't we get you in contact with a builder that is that something that municipalities do, like try to be almost like because we don't want to suggest a specific builder because that can be wrong, but is that sort of a route? Or
yeah, I think number one is that you have to have the options available to be able to present to someone, and right now there aren't too many options, right? And what we're doing is maybe giving a few more tools in Carl's toolbox when he's talking to a property owner. The other thing that I do know, Councillor, is that the secret of economic development and of community development is networks. And if as a council or as a staff person, a developer says to you, and this has happened to me many, many times during my career, and I'm sure it's happened to Joanna and Carl. Listen, if you ever come across a 20-acre parcel of land that's set up for a cluster lot development, let me know. I want to have a crack at it. And so you have those in your pocket. And then you say to property owner A, listen, I know the developer B is interested in this type of thing. You may want to have a talk to him. And all you're doing is facilitating a communication. You're not promoting one or the other. You're not advancing anybody over another, but you're just saying, I know this, and it may help you to know it as well. I wouldn't encourage you to buying lands.
Sorry, what was that?
I would not be encouraging you to be buying the lands. I don't think that would be a role, but I think introducing people is a really effective thing for a municipality to do. It's networking.
Yeah.
Okay, Ian?
Yeah, thanks for Forbes. And there's been a lot of talk about this, and I think we probably talk all night about it. You know, where we go from here, what we do, I think is probably another portion of another meeting. But, you know, we talk about strip development. I'm not a big fan of any of that stuff. And, you know, it doesn't matter where it is. And especially spots like Rosedale Road and the spots that we've already paved and everything else. Those are the spots where we need to be promoting and pushing either subdivisions or cluster developments. We don't really want, putting a cluster development back out in Pinery is probably not the greatest thing to do. It's you know, higher levels of traffic and everything else of that nature. So, you know, positioning ourselves or running our OP or whatever it is, our policies, so that we encourage and push and promote development on those paved roads is really essential. And trying to attempt to control what it is that we do there, so that we don't end up with, you know, a whole spot like Rosedale Road and the whole face of it is built up with houses and everything that's behind it is not usable to be developed anymore. So again, I think there's a lot more conversation to be had around this whole topic, and but I think we're all kind of thinking on the right on the same level and going down the right track.
Hey, Karen?
I was just going to say on the comment there where Forbes was saying about a person and passing this information on. I think our builders forum is going to be very important to get the people out here so that we can get that going as well.
Great. You're right. Claus?
Yeah, Forbes, I do really like your idea of connecting landowners to potential builders and so forth. I mean, and that's very workable. The only problem I have with that, and I've had a little bit of experience in that, is the landowner all of a sudden thinks, oh, I can make a fortune here.
Well,
Then what do you do?
And you have no idea how many times I've said to a landowner that just because you've got a developer interested in your land doesn't mean that it's worth more money. You know,
Yeah, I know.
the developer has to invest in the property to make that money at the end of the day. Raw land has a limited value in the big picture of things. And you're absolutely right, Councillor, that people think that they can make $1 million, and sometimes you can, but a lot of the times, if you're a layperson, it's a good way to lose your shirt.
Yeah, well,
Okay, I'm going to go to Ian. I'm going to go to Ian, and then maybe we've kind of exhausted this this section, and maybe we should move on. But if that's okay with council, but Ian, you're next.
well, I think that, you know, facilitating that relationship between the builder and the property owner is key. And I think that Karen has a good point when the builders forum comes up. But you know what? Instead of us having to do it or even mention anybody's names, if some builder wants to, you know, be the cluster builder in Montague Township, we obviously probably put a tab on our website, and they can go there and look at the potential builders and contact them themselves, and that way we're not really, you know, directing someone to any certain person.
Okay, so if council's fine with this, Jeff, you had you still.
I just want to ask
Sorry.
one quick question, just about the 3 severance thing. That only allowed 3 severances on it. Like that's completely out of our control still, right? Even in this process.
Well, my recommendation to you is to leave it as the 3 severances. I think the municipality has the right to set out your severance policy, whatever you want. But I think if you were to increase the number of severances,
Okay,
it would
Jeff.
probably trigger a comprehensive review, which is a big undertaking for a municipality to do. And it's certainly beyond the scope of this work. I could talk to you about it, but I think that changing that number by, at least by increasing it, would be something I'd recommend you not pursue. If that's something that you wanted to pursue, I'm here to implement your wishes, but I would really recommend that you not do that. I don't think it's a sustainable path forward.
Joanna?
I believe the county official plan limits the number of severances, so we would have to follow what the county official plan says.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident it does.
Okay, do you need us to approve this section then for you, Forbes, now?
Yes, please.
All right, I'm going to do that then. I'll start with you, Claus,
Yes, I agree.
and Jeff,
Mhm.
and Karen.
Yes, but with the modifications, like you're going to bring up back the extra information that we've asked for, right? Perfect.
And Ian.
Yes.
Okay, you've got consensus there, Forbes?
Thanks very much. I think that the next section deals with Pinery Road, and there's no recommendations there. It's information that both Carl and I worked on and provided to the member of the public that brought that up, and it's there for your information and no action. The same with promoting sustainable development. I must commend you. I think you have a very well-worded official plan when it comes to sustainable development, and I think that it's there's nothing else that I would recommend at this time. The next section, Mayor, deals with Rideau Ave, and we spoke about this last time, that I don't think it's a matter of a planning question. I think it's more of a political question. And I think if you wish to have development in that area, that's going to be something you're going to have to work out with your neighbor. And then I might be able to help you. But at this point in time, I think it's beyond the scope of this project to get involved with that too much.
Okay.
The next section with a recommendation deals with the secondary dwelling units. I'm aware that Carl has presented a very comprehensive report to you. I've reviewed it in detail. I think it's an exceptional report, and I think the recommendations to proceed with secondary dwelling units, both enclosed within the house as well as detached, have merit, and you should proceed with that. And I'd like direction to incorporate the official plan components of Carl's report in this update.
Forbes, I think that one of the areas that, and Carol also, I think that one of the areas that was kind of left when we had those discussions, one of the areas was red flagged, I think, was what we may or may not do about mobile homes. Can you correct me on that, Carol? I think that was red flagged, and I don't think that we kind of moved that forward yet. We had some discussions about it, and I think that maybe you were pointing out that a lot of it, what was important is how we would handle the site preparation and so on. But can you comment on that?
Yes, so we held the public meeting back in December, and next Tuesday I'm going to prepare a report and a recommendation to council with final policies. I've reviewed the draft, as well as some tweaks from what came following the public meeting. I've reviewed those and discussed with Forbes and Joanna, and we'll come back with a more detailed report, and that will largely be dealt with through the zoning rather than through the OP policy. But I'll certainly invite Forbes to follow up or add anything that he may wish to on that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. So Forbes, then this section is you're happy with it the way it is?
Yes, I would. I think that the wording that's in Carl's report with respect to the official plan is positive, and it doesn't get into the mobile home too much, but yes.
Okay, thanks. So then moving on to the green energy.
The next one I had, it related to the mobile homes. And again, I think that, at the last meeting, I mentioned that mobile homes aren't really a positive thing when you're dealing with affordable housing, because they're a depreciating asset. But I'll leave that for you to discuss with Carl's report.
Okay.
Green energy, I think that section 2.3 could be expanded to identify the potential for regional scale alternative energy solutions. Right now it isn't being promoted, and I think that you could benefit from maybe some larger projects being attracted to your community.
Okay.
So it would just be to highlight some opportunities for other larger industrial sized projects in your community, if that's a direction you'd like to go in.
Okay, I think that's seeing no comments.
Okay. The next one, it deals with the consent policies in general. I think that there's some benefits in tweaking the consent policies, particularly about where they can and can't go, to clarify where severances are appropriate. We've talked about this a fair bit. We're going to give you improved mapping that will be GIS ready, that hopefully will assist in identifying these resources and the areas where you can and can't, should and shouldn't. And then I've talked to Carl about the idea of having a citizen's guide to help people with severances, and so that they understand what the rules are and they don't have to pick up the official plan and go through a 100-page document to find 3 or 4 paragraphs, that you've got more of a Cole's Notes version of the severance policy and a community guide. And again, it's not policy based, it's just a helpful suggestion.
Sorry, Forbes, I probably should have asked you if you wanted us to move the green infrastructure issue, if you wanted us to have give staff direction there.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you then on this one. Karen, please.
Yes, I'm okay.
And Jeff?
Yep.
Ian?
Yep.
And Claus?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I should have done that. And then on the next one, also the same thing?
Yes, please.
Okay, Claus?
Yes.
Ian?
Yep.
Jeff?
This is for development constraints?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, no discussion on it. Everybody's like, we're not gonna, like, we're good with discussion?
If there is, if anyone wants, does anyone have any questions and comments on this one?
None?
So then,
Okay.
I'm just asking if we have consent. Oh, Jeff, yes?
Yeah, I like the citizens guide idea, because we talked about that in some of our other ones too as well. So like, really just, is that only gonna be for severances, or is that for other development opportunities? We could look at that too as well.
I think, Counselor, what I would suggest is that you start with one and pick the severances, because it's the most topical issue. And as time goes on, you may want to do other ones, like a separate guide for your business park, or a guide on promoting subdivisions, or whatever it may be. But I would think that you could have a whole series of citizen guides on different topics if you wanted. But the suggestion here is to start with the consent process, because it's the most active policy in the municipality.
Okay, so it's like you say, to start on that one, because it could be another opportunity for the business park too as well, to kind of, would it not, or does that not as important? Yeah, it would be, right? Like, it's like they would see that as like, here's what you need, here's everything you have, here's all the, because I mean, I'm sure when you look, not to retract, but go to the business park, I mean, like, people look at it and they see the water intake zone, they see a lot of scary things, but if you put something in front of them and say, this is all you need, this is everything you have, and you're covered, you're fine, it might make them a little bit more like at ease, I guess. I like the idea of making it simple, so I'd say.
Agreed.
Now, sort of follow up again, do you have a recommendation of, so this might be the first one because it's maybe the most common, I guess, because it's the severances. Do you have a recommendation of what 2, 3, and 4 would then look like, maybe to spell that out, something over the next 5, 7 years that we look at?
I would suggest, other than the business park, I wouldn't have one that would come to mind right away. But I think that the idea is that you could use a tool like this to promote and make things easier for your citizens, to make planning more understandable. So I would leave it to council as you're going along, or your staff. They would be able to give you direction, but suggesting the business park makes good sense to me as well. Like a user guide to the business park would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Joanna?
Thank you.
I was just going to throw out there, when you get the secondary suites all sorted out, you could do something for that as well.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think these are really great ideas, and they have been thoughts that have come up for years. the problem, I think, has kind of been that our staff is maxed out doing what they were hired to do. And these things, although extremely important, I feel have kind of fallen through the cracks, I guess you could say generally. And through nobody's fault, it's just a matter of time that the staff have. And who knows in the future, if the growth keeps going, then you know, we'll have to possibly look at either adding a staff member or contracting some of it out more and whatever. But it's extremely important, and I'm glad that we're bringing it forward. So Jeff, I was going to come back to you for consensus there on this development constraints issue policy.
Yeah.
Okay, and Karen?
I saw Carl's hand up. I don't know if he does want to speak, Bill.
Okay, sure. Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Even. And just to follow up on Joanna's comment, one of the recommendations from the Housing Task Force report that was recently adopted in Smith Falls was the creation of a user's guide for just this very thing. The town's going to be looking at some very similar housing policy through their zoning review in the coming months. But there's a lot of examples for municipalities throughout Ontario who've adopted similar secondary unit policy similar to what we're looking at in the coming weeks that are using that can be used sort of as a model, and then we can kind of adapt and create a Montague specific version for that. But I think the most important thing, as everyone's has alluded to, is creating a user-friendly guide. So somebody who doesn't do this for a living and wants to create a second unit, at least has some direction and knows where to go. So I think it's a very positive direction. And as the Reeve noted, I think we'll sort of have to triage which ones we're going to do first and how we're going to stage these.
Thanks, Karen, for that. I was reading my page and I didn't see his hand, so thank you, Karen, for catching that. Okay, so we have consensus on that, this policy, and then we're going to move on to the next one.
Very good. The next one, I'm not going to go in too much detail. It's regarding consultation with Algonquins of Ontario, and there's 5 areas where I suggest that we could put reference to the Algonquins in the official plan to satisfy the PPS.
Good. Any comments? I think we have consensus there. Then I'll go around. Claus?
Yes.
Ian?
Yep.
And Karen?
Yes.
And Jeff?
The next section deals with the Rideau Canal, and I did provide you some very detailed policies that came out of the Rideau Canal landscape strategy on improvements to your official plan as they relate to the Rideau Canal. And I would like direction to proceed with drafting those up so that you can take a more detailed look at that.
Okay, I'll just go around again. Jeff?
Yeah, too bad you can't build more on it, but I mean, yep.
Ian?
Yep.
And Claus?
Yes.
And Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. Moving on then. Aggregate mapping.
Yeah, there's a few edits that Ministry of Energy and Northern Development and Mines have suggested, and they were in their comments that have been attached to the report. And again, direction to proceed to present those edits to you in a formal amendment.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Seeing none then. Karen?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yep.
Ian?
Yep.
And Claus?
Yes.
And yes for myself. Thanks. Okay.
And the final thing from the report, my staff have done mapping for the natural heritage systems. That's a requirement in the provincial policy statement. And it's a pretty straightforward. You had a lot of it done already, and it's I'll be able to demonstrate to you that it's a relatively minor change, and we can work towards that consideration. But I would like the opportunity to present that in the OPA.
Okay. And you need consensus there?
Yes, please.
Claus,
Yes.
Ian,
Yep.
Jeff, and Karen?
Yes.
Okay, and yes.
The last thing I have, Reeve, if I may, at the last meeting, there was a request that I do a specific assessment of your agricultural lands to see if there's an opportunity to modify what is deemed to be agriculture under your official plan. And I did provide a brief planning report that I believe you've been submitted, been provided. Essentially, at the end of the day, the municipality doesn't have too much flexibility on this issue. This is an issue that's dictated very much by the provincial government and through the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. And this has been a planning policy that I've dealt with my entire career, and it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. We looked at what you have designated agriculture right now, and for the most part, it's class 1, 2, and 3 lands. There are some poor lands in there, but the way the rules are set up is that poor land needs to be brought into the bigger agricultural picture. There's a lot of the municipality shall do this and shall do that in the PPS with respect to agriculture. I think at this point in time, I would recommend that you not change the policy and you not change it. I think to attempt to change the designation would be a large, expensive undertaking that would give you disappointing results at the end of the day. That's not to say it's impossible, but it's pretty darn close to it. I'm happy to talk about that report in more detail if you'd like.
Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Forbes, not a question with the report, just a question about the map. I notice here how far it goes, almost up to Wood Road, and then gets close to the Rideau and so forth. Acton Drive, which I know there's a farm in there, it's an open space. How come the two sections highlighted in purple are not right tied together?
I'm sorry, and that's a confusion of my map. The symbol that has the little cross on it is the agricultural land. The cross hatch was the area that was appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board. All of the area with the little cross on it, that's the entire designation.
Okay. So there was an appeal then.
It does pick up the lands on Acton Road.
It does? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I just noticed. That's okay. Because I thought when we did this a long time ago, I know that was all included in there.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, that was a good report, Forbes, and thank you for that. It was quite, when I started reading it, I had some questions. By the time I finished, it all made sense.
Reeve?
Yes, Ian, thanks.
Yeah, but I could ask Forbes a quick question. I guess Forbes, my question is not changing the designation of the area or of the actual, how do you say this? Not changing the classification of the land that's existing, that's there. I think everybody agrees that it's all class 1 or class 2 or class 3. My question is, can it be moved from that area to another area within the township?
No, it can't be. And the reason is it's the same as aggregate and wetlands. The resource is where the resource is. The aggregate is where the deposit of gravel and sand is. The wetland is where it's wet. The agriculture is where it's good soil. And so you can't move your agricultural designation from an area of good soil to another area of the township where the soil isn't good.
No, I'm not saying that to move it to another area where the soil isn't good, to an area of the township where the soil is as good as what it is here.
So what I would suggest would happen, Counselor, is that they would say, well, if there's another area of the township that has good soil, we'll designate that agriculture as well. And they won't let you to move it. You will not be able to get rid of agricultural lands, unfortunately. And I know that that's upsetting, but my job is to tell you the facts.
And to your point there, Ian, it's a good point and a good thought. But one of the things that they looked at was they encouraged us to have it in one big block. And I don't think there was another area in the township that would be near as big as that one block. I think that was one of the things that they were really looking for. Jeff?
Just the key on Councillor Straight's point. I mean, I get it, because I mean, like, there's a whole waterfront land there that is like prime real estate that is basically being, that can't be developed into real estate. And I guess that's the other, that's the hard part about it. And it's like, and you're not even talking about taking all of this agricultural land. You're saying, like, we want to take, from the water, whatever it is for a lot size that goes from the water out kind of idea to land. Like, that's almost what you want. You almost want to have that strip that's not agricultural, so you can at least utilize it for that kind of development. That would be, that's got to be a great tax incentive. It's got to be it's people want to live on the water just because it's another option. So,
well, I think kind of go along with what Jeff is saying. We all just talked about development and developing in areas that paved roads and everything else. This is a fully maintained county road. If there's any spot for where we want, or we could have some development, this is a great spot. Not only that, if we're talking about communal wells and everything else and septics and everything else, the first thing you need to be able to do to have one of those is dig. And you're not going to put a communal well in a septic, probably, possibly back in the Piney where there's only 12 inches of topsoil.
Yeah, the thing is, I guess I did in your report, Forbes, you do talk about, and I agree with it, because a few years ago, part of the Rideau Corridor landscape strategy work was to follow the shoreline from Ottawa to Kingston. And certainly when you do that, and you're going through Montague Township, you do definitely see a lot of the land that is low-lying swamp land, which would be very difficult to develop on.
Yeah, it's sort of between the wetland and the agriculture, there's not a whole lot there. And
No.
I understand exactly what your frustrations are, Councillor Straight, and I have empathy for them, but I just don't think that there's a way to get to where you want to go, given the way that the legislation's drafted.
Okay, so anything else then? Okay, I think then we can move on, Forbes.
Yes, sir. I am done.
Okay. That's it then? Claus?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone else got it, but Tom May just sent us an email on Citizen Guide Land Services Ontario Housing. Did you get that, Joanna?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole already self-made guide there.
There's lots of them out there, Councillor.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's nothing else then. Okay, seeing no more hands for comments and questions, then we're going to move on. Carol, thank you for all your input, and to Forbes, I feel very, very happy with what you've done. You've really given us a lot of thought and further thought. And we really appreciate this, and we'll be looking forward to now your next report. And to council, I think that we've gone through each section and asked lots and lots of great questions and comments. And I think I'm so confident that we're going to have a very, very improved OP moving forward. And I also don't think that we're going to have too much problem when we present it to the county. So thank you to both of you for all of your work, and for your also new backup, Joanna, for your help. So between all of you, I think you're doing a great job. So thanks very much for that. And to council for all of the questions. And I really liked the idea that you did include all of the comments from the public, Forbes. That was great. So then moving forward, I have a motion then. I'm going to read it again. I should have waited after the report. I was jumping the gun here. So I'm going to read it again. And we'll vote on it again. So this motion was moved by Klaus Vandermeer and seconded by Ian Straight, that council receive the issues and options report of the official plan review and update, and that the following be recommended to council: that council provide comments and direction for staff to proceed with drafting the official plan amendment document to bring forward to a public meeting. Yes, Joanna?
I just want to jump in here and confirm with Forbes that when you do have that document, it will in fact be ready for a public meeting, or did you want to have council have one more go at it? Should we amend the motion?
No, I think the way the motion's read is that it's direction from council. So I would like to be able to bring a draft amendment back to council to have a review, because we all know the devil lives in the detail, right? To look at that and to make sure that they're comfortable with the wording that I present to them before we go to the public meeting. But I think the way the motion's drafted is fine, Joanna. It gives me everything I need to go forward.
Okay.
Thanks, Joanna. And I think because our council have done such a good job in bringing up all of the different details, Forbes, you've got still some work to do, and for it to come back as a draft and us to look at it is only the way to go for sure. So that's great. So all in favor of this motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Then seeing nothing else, I have a motion which was moved by Jeff Carroll and seconded by Karen Jennings, that the special meeting do now adjourn at 8:02. Yes, Karen.
Do you check for questions from the public?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I should. I'm sorry.
We do
Thank
not
you.
have any questions from the public.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we should. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me.
We got
Okay,
lucky.
so that's at 8:02 p.m. All in favor? So this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you to everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
And I
Good night.
think we'll
Thank
be
you.
looking forward, Joanna, to your next update on the good news that you gave us at the beginning of the meeting.
Oh yeah, we'll let you know. Well, as soon as we hear
We'll
from
be looking
Jasmine, we'll
forward
let you
to
know.
it.
She'll be sending
We'll be
pictures,
looking
don't
forward
worry.
to it. That'll be like the weight and the names and everything else.
Yeah.
So.